Mr. Sullivan.
And it's Mr. Jackson, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yeah.
Listen, I just have one question today.
Yes.
Are you ever going to give me up?
No. I've carefully given through the checklist of all the different things that I could do to screw you, and I won't do that. I won't do any of them.
Oh man, that's so funny.
I just finished a fascinating book along those lines, and the title of the book is "Who Can You Trust?" And it's a British journalist, and it's a fascinating book. And she's got a thesis right at the beginning that the level of trust that humans have is actually sort of a constant. And so when you read headlines or you hear news reports that people have completely lost trust in this doesn't mean that their amount of trusting has gone down. It's just that they're shifting it from one thing to another.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really...
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just talking about this. I wrapped up a Breakthrough Blueprint event here in Orlando this week. And one of the things that we were talking about was we were going deep on the psychology of referrals and why we refer. Like, we have this inherent desire to support and enhance our friends, our closest, our tribe, our top 150, right? The people that we know. And that goes all the way back that, there's so much of society that we really take for granted. I mean, that is built on a fabric of this baseline level of trust. I mean, in those days, it was this. That's why, would you study Robin Dunbar, where he, came up with Dunbar's number, that most tribes had 150 plus or minus, very handful of people, because that's the number that we're capable of having a I know you, you know me, and my context in your life relationship with, right? When it gets beyond that, we don't have that level of capacity to manage more than that, and it becomes a threat to the group. Because if we're wandering around back then and you didn't know people in your midst there, you didn't know that they were one of you, right? That you could trust them. And now, I mean, we look at all these things now that we take for granted, this baseline level of trust. Like we drive in, vehicles, 3,000-pound vehicles, driving 100 kilometers an hour down the road with an implicit trust that the person driving the other way is going to stay on the other side of that yellow line, even though they're hurtling at 100 miles an hour the same way. And all business relationships are based on that inherent trust, right? Credit card companies give people the ability to, just show them this card and I'll vouch for you and I'll give them the money and you just pay me back at usurious interest rates, right?
Yeah.
But it's just...
Yeah, it's very interesting. Have you met Chris Hale?
I don't. Where would I have met him?
Well, it would have been a 10 time or in the 10 times workshop. So he's from Silicon Valley, actually, but he was a financial advisor, a wealth manager who did well and has basically, rendered the company to self-managing and self-multiplying status, so that all of his time has been freed up. And but what he's created is an international platform, a global platform that's called Countable. And what among its main features is that businesses all around the world are heavily evaluated on terms of their social media network. In other words, who do they interact with? So that would be, the various social media platforms, and one of them is, of course, LinkedIn and everything like that. And they are given credit value for the power of their social media. It's analyzed. They've got an analytic tool. And therefore, they will be funded, money that they need, and especially where it's they're funding transactions across global borders, where they'll be given credit to actually, send. Send what they have, and it's backed up. It's backed up by accountable through a series of investors. Investors actually invest in this, and then there's a payoff for being an investor in this. But it's an interesting notion of I'll have to get her name. It's B-O-N-S, Bondsman. I think Bondsman is her last name. Or Bosman or Bondsman. I'm not quite sure what the name is, but it's called Who Can You Trust? And it's fascinating because she said that there's a profound shift going on where humans are taking trust away from human institutions and placing them into technological platforms. And we're looking for the technological platforms that we can trust.
Yes. And
give you an example is the ATM. So I've been using the ATM for as long as they've been available, at least a quarter century. And I've always gotten I've never been shortchanged, and
anywhere in the world,
my balance has never been wrong.
Right.
And so I trust the ATM system.
And it's interesting now. There's sort of news from China that as they're rolling out their social score program, their social scoring, so that people are, in everything, right? Taking in all the factors. It's kind of as we move towards that level of transparency.
Here's what I know about the system that the Communist Party of China will run, that it'll be, first of all, it'll be 100% totalitarian from the first moment it's put out there, and it'll be 100% totally corrupt. That there will be a new medium of corruption now where you can pay programmers who are running the social credit
raise
system
your score.
To raise your score for a certain amount of money. I mean, it's just made for corruption.
Wow. Isn't that something? I mean, you look at, it's kind of an interesting thing that when we think about, I've been thinking about all this stuff that we know and all this, all the data being sort of compiled now, and the access to it is just kind of in different silos in a lot of ways, but it's kind of converging into one. And I think it's going to be a very interesting time when we converge this with blockchain, for instance, and that everybody will have this instant and available credit to them, if they're credit worthy or whatever. That there's no sort of application process or decision process. I think it'll be an invisible marketplace for it that'll happen in background, that somebody similar, another level of the pre-approved credit card offers that people have there, that I think it's going to get to a point where preemptively people are going to offer to fund things for people to be able to calculate quickly what I want to buy this house, and it can happen instantly.
The ledger. The distributed ledger automatically gives you instant verification around the world that you're creditworthy and that you are who you are. You have what you say you have, and you are who you say you are. I think that's what we want. We want that trust.
Yeah.
That if we're dealing halfway around the world with someone, we don't want to have it be costly to verify that the person is trustworthy. And the other thing is, we don't want it to be really inconvenient to, that it's going to take up a lot of time. It's going to require a lot of hassle for me to verify that I can trust someone who's around the world that I haven't met, I haven't seen, I haven't interacted with, but I want to be able to trust that person.
And I think all that is going to happen largely invisibly, behind the scenes, instantly. That I'd be able to say, I want to buy this house, and instantly it would be approved behind the scenes. And who knows, there's maybe a marketplace of people who are, maybe bidding even or competing for the ability to take that debt.
Yeah. One of the chapters that this author who wrote the book, Who Can You Trust, has is a whole chapter on the entire drug trade that's done entirely on the dark web. And so the dark web, which has been something I've just come across mainly through novels over the last 2 or 3 years, that there's a whole mirror internet that is essentially for, really criminal activity.
It just sounds like such a shady kind of shady kind of place.
The interesting thing she says that where it's where you can essentially you're buying drugs that are and they're illegal drugs. So it's heroin, it's coke, it's in some places marijuana. And she said that because it's conducted on the web, basically it's much more honest than street level illicit drug trade. And she said that the dark web punishes very, very quickly anybody who cheats or passes off drugs to say this is 100%, but it's actually 50%. And she said the comeback on the dark web is incredibly fast, and that the dealers do their utmost to establish trustworthiness. So there's, some of them have scoring systems that everybody who purchased from them can score them. And I find it very, very interesting. She says it's actually one of the best uses for online buying in the world, and that it's self-enforcing. There's no regulatory, obviously there's no regulatory body that enforces honesty. But she said it's a self-policing, self-trusting system. And she said it's probably further ahead than most of the above board systems where you're dealing almost like in pure crime, technically, according to government laws, you're dealing in pure crime, that it's much more honest than
honor.
Ones that are
it's
actually,
funny
that are actually legally regulated.
Honor among thieves, right? Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. Well, there's no regulator to get around, and so you have to be more honest because the profits are much bigger. I mean, it's a very, very profitable, and of course, no one knows where these people live. Basically, you can't track them down to find out where and everything's done with cryptocurrency, and all the payments are in cryptocurrency, and but it's all delivered by the post office, so they've learned how to ship packages in such a way that they're undetectable, And,
wow.
But it's a fascinating chapter. I mean, it was just all total, just total learning on my part, because I'm just very recently becoming aware of this thing called the dark web. And then the fact that it's probably some of the commercial breakthroughs that will later end up in the honest world, or the legal world, are already
the light
being
web
experimented with in there. So it kind of tells you that, going back to your your basic awareness of the world is through your 150 relationships.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And that's kind of it's an interesting thing as that really now expands, that we're able to have that level of trust with people.
Yeah.
So
it's really interesting. My 4x4 that I put out for the game changer group. I said, this is how I want you to perform. This is how I want you to. These are the results I want you to do. This is how you can be a hero to me, and this is how you
drive me crazy.
Can really drive me crazy. It's had a noticeable impact. I noticed the real upswing in the workshops in September. I put it out in July. I've noticed a real upswing in the amount of collaboration and the amount of sharing that's gone on in all the workshops, simply because I put out a set of do's and don'ts regarding how you could best be as a participant in the Game Changer, but also what you could expect of your fellow participants.
Yes. Yeah. I was talking with, who was I with? Oh, Nick Nanton. I was just with Nick on Friday, and we were talking about what a great workshop October was. That was really, like, we see the whole everything as a group even gelling, which is great. As everybody understands this.
Just kudos to Nick Nanton for everyone listening. He just won his 5th Emmy Award.
It's his 11th, Dan. He won 6 just this last weekend, bringing his total to 11, including Best Director of the popular Dan Sullivan Game Changer.
The Dan Sullivan Game Changer video. Yeah, so we were really pleased with that, but all kudos to Nick, because so he won 6 this time. I did not know this.
He's got 11. He was nominated for 7.
He had 5 before that. He had
5 before that. He was nominated for 7 this time and won 6 of them, including 4. He's done some. The level of work is just going up and up. I mean, you can see that. It's so amazing. I love the way he thinks. We get together, probably 6 or 8 times a year just to have a day together and think and talk. And so it was really, it's good to see.
Just contemplate this, Dean. What if half of your 150, I'm talking about you personally, half of your 150 were 10 quick starts who were in the Game Changer program?
I know, it's true, right? That's the thing, is that's where, I really see that. I mean, and a lot of them, I mean,
Nick's one of them.
Yeah, Nick is one of them. Joe Polish is one.
No, Joe's a 9. Joe's a 9.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have how many 10 quick starts are there in Game Changer?
Well, I had a new one start in September, and I had a new one start this week. So I've got 4 that I know of. With, you and Nick, and Garnet Morris, who came in September, and Norm Dunnigan, who came in just started on Thursday. And and it's really, really interesting that and I think it's very, very interesting that it's a place where you can truly do who, not how, with other people who are as quick thinking as you are.
Right. We should start the Q10 Society.
Yeah.
But it's
really interesting. There's kind of instant comprehension. What I've known.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have some brain power to go along with the. I asked Kathy Colby once, what if you had a 10 quick start in her profiling system? If you were a 10 quick start, but they had a really low IQ, and she said, well, you just have an. She said you just have an endless series of really, really stupid ideas.
That's an endless series of really stupid ideas. I love it. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I read something really interesting today, or this week, Dan, as a nice little transition here for us. Um, I read an article about a study in Melbourne, Australia, that looked at the effect on our cognitive abilities of work. We are working the optimal amount of working hours. What I would call, what I'm taking from this is engaged doing your your unique ability, or our that's the way I would look at it here, is that it seems that the optimal number is 25 hours a week of engaged time that has a positive correlation on our cognitive ability. So working less than 25 hours, you can increase your cognitive, health and abilities up to 25 hours. And then after 25 hours, it starts to have a negative effect on your cognitive abilities. And this stretches well into, the people, they say, up to 80 years old. So it's not to and it ties in with what you were saying about retirement, your whole view on retirement, that people get to 65 and they immediately shut down, and there's no 25 hours of engaged time in their week to keep their cognitive abilities up. And that was an interesting, I felt, study, because that seems like exactly what we're shooting for here.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about that is, and let's say it is true that it's 25 hours. Might vary a little bit because it's obviously an average.
Yeah,
it's an average, but I'll take the average and do 25. And then what you want to do is you want to increase the unique ability quality of the 25 hours.
That's it.
And then the second step you want to do is you want to have more and more of your unique ability activity be about simply stating what the bigger and better goal is, and then immediately finding the who is actually going to do all of the how.
That's it. I think there's some number of that with your, I think that that 25 hours could really, if you're doing it right from Hood, if we're talking about 100 times impact, that could be guiding or directing 2,500 hours a week of concerted effort moving into
on the part of other people.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So you have 100 people working at that 25 hours all in the same direction. That's a 2,500 hour. Moving in concert.
So your 25 triggers 2,500.
It could. I mean, yours does.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there a lot of this stuff, and this number, and also the Dunbar number that you gave me at the beginning. This is based on people being relatively unconscious of what they're doing. In other words, you have 150 that you interact with, and can go out to 150. But this is, I think it's based on unconsciousness.
The interesting thing when they did,
and the same thing with this 25 hour, this is for the most part based on a general population.
Right.
The highest percentage of them are totally unconscious what they're doing. Yeah. They're just basically on the beam, off the beam, on the beam.
Yeah.
But if if they have a lucky week where they're spending 25 hours on the beam, it's the best week that they can have.
And that's and it's interesting that, just to correlate with Robin Dunbar's work, that when they looked at at Facebook for normal people, I mean, people not like entrepreneurs or people who are trying to, who have an inflated number of friends, the average number of friends for real people, normal society, is 153 people.
Wow.
Yeah, which is so interesting, right? I mean, it's like, because the real Facebook people are, I mean, real, the world on Facebook, what they've got is, 150, 150 friends,
Yeah.
people that they know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting over the course of my podcast series with Peter Diamandis. We've talked about this difference between local and global. Which is the number one political issue, or it's the number one point of global tension or human tension right now.
Yeah.
Is the tension between things that are going global and things that want to stay local.
Yes.
Politics is local. The economy driven by technology. The Cloudlandia is really global. It happens on global. But I've constantly been thinking as I hear this is that the relationships that we appreciate most are the ones that actually happen in the mainland.
Yes.
But what we utilize is Cloudlandia capabilities to make these relationships easier to maintain and easier to enrich and easier to strengthen. We use Cloudlandia means to strengthen what are our favorite mainland relationships.
Yes. And it's pretty amazing when we think about the implications there. Like, I just read that now the number of people online now just reached 3.9 billion. So that means Cloudlandia population 3.9 billion.
Now
it's the reality of what that means.
It's now more than 50%
of the world. Then it's interesting. Yeah, in the United States, it's 1 in 4 people in the United States is not online. So the United States has the one of the highest rates of adoption of the internet, but there's
which does
70 United States 76%. 76% of the United States is online. So that's kind of but India is the emerging one, even more than China, because China, of course, everything is filtered, right? They're not really in Cloudlandia. They're in a walled off garden of Cloudlandia.
Yeah, well, two things about China and India, which are actually, when people kind of go gaga about China, and they're doing the same thing to China that was happening to Japan in around 1980. But the Japanese, of course, were going to control the 21st century, and they're saying the same thing now about China. Of course, the Chinese are going to control the 21st century. And I said, well, it's really interesting that the Chinese population actually peaked in 2013. In other words, they're now dropping. And
I did not know that. Okay.
And they'll start dropping quickly, simply because they have the fastest aging population in the world because of their 40 years of the one child policy. Okay. So what they've got is an increasingly top-heavy, age-wise population. And just for two statistics, projections, these are predictions, but they're using fairly standard and cautious demographic projections, that right now the United States average age, if you take the entire population and you take the average age of the U.S., it's around 37, and I think China is slightly below that. It's about 36. But by 2050, the average age in the United States will have moved up 1 year from 37 to 38. But in China, it will have moved up 15 years.
Wow.
So the average age of the Chinese in 2050 will be 51. And the second prediction is that by the year 2100, the population of the United States will be about 500 million, and the population of China will be 1 billion. So the U.S. will have half the population.
Oh, wow.
That China
So it's
does.
really, China's really going to drop, huh?
Well, yeah, they're really going to drop, and this is why they're kind of desperate,
Right.
So when you hear about their credit score system, of total societal surveillance, this is out of pure paranoia on the part of the Chinese leadership, because they don't see the United States as their biggest enemy. The leadership of the Chinese government doesn't see the United States as their greatest enemy or any other country in the world. They see their own people as their greatest enemy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's like you can't even imagine like what the day-to-day, like, life in a country like that would be. It's just we take that so much for granted. That largely we're self-directed in every way. What we think, what we do, what we watch, what we engage in, who we associate with, where we go, all of that. You can't even imagine that every one of those things is controlled or monitored.
Yeah. And I generally have the feeling, and throughout my whole life, and it'd be interesting to get you. I just feel kind of left alone to do my own thing.
Right.
I mean, I've never had the sense that my behavior in any way was being curbed by someone else's surveillance of me.
Yes. That's true for I mean that's true on a lot of deep levels.
And that's one of the trust factors we have, of just particularly living in, Canada, the U.S. I don't have a sense that my performance or my results are being particularly observed by anyone.
Right.
I mean, there's systems like the revenue collectors and that, they do notice you at certain times of the year simply because they feel you owe them money. One thing I wanted to tell you, it was just a thought that came to me, and I thought you would appreciate it. If you want to know your true income last year, ask the revenue department. They never underestimate.
Oh, right. That's funny. They know.
Yeah, they may overestimate, but I have to tell you, they never underestimate how much income you made. Yeah, it's just a funny thing that these checkout points that we have in our society. I just want to tell you a little progress in one of our previous. I mentioned this line. There's never any room for improvement, but improvement always creates. So I created this into an actual exercise at the beginning of the workshop. So everybody walks into the workshop, and there's a statement on the screen that says there's never any room for improvement. It's just a big statement. So when I walk in, first of all, I got a lot of people said, what's that about? What is this thing about? Which tells me I've done partially my job because someone noticed it. And then I start and I just click, and then the second line comes up. But improvement always creates more room. And then I have this animated. I show the two conditions of that. And what I say is, right now you're operating at 100% capability, and there's no room for improvement. Okay, right where you are now, you're starting the workshop. You're at 100% capability. There's no gap. There's no gap. You're doing 100% as well as you can, and there's no room for improvement. And then I've added just a little bit of a humorous touch to it, showing, you're trying to get more room, and basically the world's saying to you, nope, forget it, buzz off, get out of here, Right. And I said, but if during the course of the day you identify 4 or 5 improvements you would like to make and spend the quarter making them, then 90 days from now, you will have created more room for yourself.
Right. That's great. And that was, it was interesting because I don't think we've talked about it since, but I emailed you after we had our, that's true for, it seems like there's never any time or money. Yeah, time for improvement, but every improvement creates more time, new time, and there's never any money for improvement, but every improvement creates new money. It's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the things Alex Epstein was in for his workshop, Alex, with the moral case for possible, and through our various connections. And I was saying to him that one of the things that nobody talks about is that there's never at any time any surplus energy available in the world. We're at 100% utilization of the accessible available energy.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, what about large supplies of, oil and gas that are just in tanks, or they're, and I said, well, it's not accessible. It's not available.
Right.
And I said that, so the whole notion that you can completely cut out the main source of energy in the world and replace it with renewables, I said there will never be a minute, never be an hour when that's practically possible, because we need the energy. Every day, 7.7 billion people, all with goals of one kind or another that require more energy in the future. They don't want any cutback in any kind of energy between now and when they get to that. And they won't give up their plans. They won't give up their progress for some theory about what's going to happen to the world 100 years from now.
Right. And that was it. That was Scott Adams has a pretty interesting YouTube channel where each morning he does a live coffee with Scott Adams. Scott Adams, the Dilbert,
I know
cartoonist. Yeah. I was just saying that for people who don't know.
He's the great Democrat who predicted Trump was going to win hands down, in the middle of 2050. So this guy, he's going to take the whole thing. He's going to knock all the competitors in his own party out like duck pins, which actually happened. And he said, and then he's going to win the election. And it was all not based on his political beliefs, because he said, most of my life I voted Democratic. But he said he just has a stack of persuasive talents that are just unmatchable out in the world, and he proves it day to day. Every day they say, "Oh, now he's in trouble. Now he's going down. Yeah, the end is near."
Right, exactly. And it's so funny that he kind of gives a play-by-play on
and he tells you exactly
the influence.
What he does. So tell me about this the Scott thing you were talking about. I love him by the way. I listened to a podcast with him and Sam Adams.
Yes, I do.
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris, yeah.
And on political matters.
Yeah.
And it was just fun to see Sam Harris, who prides himself on being so rational and everything, just continually, increasingly loses cool in the course of the podcast, because Scott Adams just stakes out where the middle is, and you have to run around the periphery to deal with him.
Yes. So he was talking this time about global warming and all the the big advocates around that, and why it'll never really nothing will ever really be done about it, in terms of that the impact of it. They're saying by 2100 that the perhaps economic impact on GDP of global warming might be 10%, right? Worst case scenario. And he's saying, you look like that, like forward, the GDP of the United States at 2100 will be so big that will largely be unnoticeable. and all the main things that are going to be troublesome will figure things out for, in terms of we'll figure out how to, how to accommodate the change, like rising water levels, or the how to cool people more reliably. There's actually a big, I don't know whether I heard that's one of the X Prize things that are out, is more efficient air conditioning. And this whole, because it's been largely the same technology for air conditioning since it was invented, right? And
by Carrier. I mean, it was Carrier.
Okay.
I mean, it goes back a century. That air conditioning was created.
And these are kind of, arguments that Alex Epstein might have.
Yeah, well, Alex's whole point is, he says, look, I don't have a love affair with fossil fuels.
Yeah.
But it isn't about fossil fuels. It's about energy that's dependable, cheap, and reliable, as accessible. He says, if you can come up with a new one that checks all three boxes, hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But right now, there's the only one on the planet that is probably the best bet for the future is nuclear.
Right, and I think that there's new advances now that fusion will be at some point. I think I heard Scott Adams say that too, that now it's become, they figured out the science of it, and now it's an engineering problem to become to figure out how to make the massive magnetized things that they need to contain it or whatever.
Yeah. But the U.S. Navy, since 1953, has been running all of its new subs and all of its new aircraft carriers since 1953 have been nuclear powered, and they have a 25 years. It goes for 25 years without refill, and they have a nuclear reactor on the subs and a couple of them on the aircraft carriers, and they make all their fresh water every day simply by running seawater over the reactors to keep everything cool, and they pump out more than they need in fresh water every day.
It's kind of a miracle thing if they could figure it out.
Yeah, and they've had no accidents.
Right.
It's 6,100 24/7 nuclear year. They call them nuclear years. It's year is and they've done it, and 3 Mile Island, which was the famous incident that caused it really caused a stop in creating new reactors. Well, there were two reactors at 3 Mile Island. One of them they shut down, and by the way, nobody was hurt. Nobody had suffered ill effects as a result of it having a problem. But the other one's been going ever since then, and it's about 20,000 homes, 30,000 homes have been powered nonstop since then. I grew up near a big nuclear reactor, and if you were born in Toronto, you had Pickering. Pickering was a big nuclear reactor.
Right. Interesting, huh?
Yeah. But I love Scott Adams. I mean, he's a wonderful, and he just has first principles that he applies to the world. And he says one of them is persuasive skill.
Yes.
One of the most fundamental things. And he says it isn't one thing. It's any number of things. But if you can stack a lot of persuasive skills on top of each other, they magnify each other. And
well, I think you'll like it. I mean, you can go, it's on YouTube, and the channel is Coffee with Scott Adams. And
I'll do that.
He does it every day, and just some kind of summary. He actually does it live from Twitter, where he'll do it through Periscope, and then he'll, get as soon as 1,000 people join in the first couple of minutes, he'll have everybody join him for the simultaneous sip. They get their coffee or whatever it is, and they synchronize by taking the simultaneous sip, and that's the
really
symbolic start of the show.
the Cloudlandia world
Yeah.
that I've been doing Facebook Live every month or so. I do a
Yeah.
Facebook Live where one of my team members interviews me,
Yeah.
and they have to write me a impact filter to launch the project, and I said,
Right.
good, it's good. And we've been for the first 7, I think we got around 7,000 or 8,000 downloads
Yeah.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we hired a new person on our social media team, and she came in and she says, there's a little trick you can pull with these. So
Yeah.
the first one we did, we went from 7.5, we went from 8,000, let's say 8,000 was our best previous number. And with this one, we went to 38,000. And
Yeah.
she
Nice.
said, she said, you just slipped Facebook another $200 and that you can multiply your results.
They boost it
five
for
times.
You.
Yeah. And anything.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, it tells me how the world actually works. And I thought I'd try this one on you. There's 2 types. Maybe I tried this out last time. I said there's 2 types of knowledge on the planet. One of them's called inside knowledge. The other one's called worthless knowledge.
Oh, right. That's funny. That's great. Inside knowledge and worthless knowledge. Yes.
Yeah. And everything I've seen that really works on the planet is because certain people have inside knowledge that is really, really useful, and all other knowledge in that particular area is kind of worthless knowledge because it doesn't produce the results.
Yeah.
Okay. And government absolutely depends for its longevity on worthless knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can have lots of meetings.
Yes. And I mean, you sure can. And I think that worthless knowledge, it's kind of an interesting take, because I've been really these last few weeks really paying attention to my level of connectedness to Cloudlandia, to the internet, to my phone. I've been experimenting with tapering times, and I wanted to ask you about, and I know are you still, would you say, at about 2 hours a day online, or is that?
Yeah.
And how do you what's like a Cloudlandia day in the life for you?
Well,
so do you do it usually at the same time?
Yeah, well, it starts in the morning. I get up and I get an energy drink before I start my exercise routine.
Yeah.
And I've got supplements I take, so I get them out of the way first thing in the morning.
Yep.
And there's about a 15-minute period where I'll just check on, and I've got sites that I go to, and my main one is called Real Clear Politics.
Right.
And I go there, and it's an what are they called?
Aggregator.
They're a big aggregator out of Chicago, and what they do is they have they just check out the previous 24 hours of headlines and articles of all the media. Probably probably about 500 publications in the world, and they just pick the ones that they think their readers will be interested in for that day. Mm-hmm. And then they have a main one, which is called Real Clear Politics, and then they have about 8 other channels, if you will. Mm-hmm. One on markets, so it's just economic news. They have one on policy, which is basically not the events of politics, but sort of the lines of thinking of politics. They have health, they have science, they have history, they have books. They have one on cyber now. It's just cyber, so it deserves its own channel, and sports, and each of them is an aggregator in its own right. Now, the Real Clear Politics, probably politics, policy, and markets and world. They have the mm-hmm. first 4 are 24-hour cycles, and the other ones are probably 2 to 3 day cycles.
Okay.
And the readership, I mean, they're really even-handed. Like I was looking at it this morning, and I would say in Real Clear Politics, and it's U.S. politics that they're talking about there, they probably had 20 articles listed, last 24 hours. And I would say they were about half and half. They would favor the left or favor the right.
Yeah.
But then they have a little scorecard, scoreboard of most read articles over the last 24 hours. And it's very clear that it's the readership is Republican, conservative Republican. Okay. Yeah. So, who's doing the reading here? It's mostly Republicans, or someone who would be on the conservative side would be the readership.
Right.
But it's very interesting. A publication like the New York Times, which is arguably the number one most prestigious newspaper in the world, they have to fight, to get there. They have to take a ticket and stand in line to get one of their articles on Real Clear Politics.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you do that for about 15 minutes?
I do that, and I'll download. I won't read the article. I'll just, I'll click on it and I'll get like the first paragraph, and then if it's good enough, I just bookmark it for later that day.
Okay.
And then, so I'll get a early swipe, and then there's I go to Breitbart, which is a big conservative platform. I have a whole series of platforms. There's one called American Thinker, which is more weighty type of essays and articles. And I check the sports news. I've always been a sports news, and that's it then. And then during the day, when I've gotten my 5 engaged hours in, I get a little weary. So in the afternoon, I can't do much creative work because I usually get up around 4:30.
Right.
And then around 3:00, Babs is finishing up with stuff. I'll go on for an hour and just read what I bookmarked that morning. And then there's links from one thing to another. Oftentimes, if it's a really good article, it'll pull up other articles to support it. So you go into this network of articicles.
So you're in the cafe while Babs is
in my cafe to do it.
Office.
But I said if you watched and measured me for 7 days, it would probably come out to 14, 15 hours that I do this a week. And and I never see myself changing. It's an enjoyable activity, And I'm not really looking for anything in particular. I'm really looking for things I didn't know before, or I wasn't aware. So I can't have an algorithm that finds me articles that I'm looking for, because that's exactly what I am not looking for.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yes, you want to go discover it. That's exactly right. Yeah.
No, I want articles that catch me by surprise.
Right. Yes.
I didn't know that. Gee, I haven't seen that. Like the article that you just talked to me about. I would be fascinated with the Australian article. So
I'll forward you that.
You owe me one. You owe me one. Yeah.
It's in Inc. magazine.
Okay.
That's
a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's kind of thing. So you're not keeping up with the Kardashians or anything, not going to teenbeat.com or anything.
No, I don't.
To keep on top of
I kind of pick up things on social, culture. There's a interesting comment by somebody, and I forget who actually said it, but he said that culture is now upstream from politics. In other words, that politics is now caught, actually, if you look at the political world, it's caught between two things. It's caught between culture and it's caught, on the one side, it's caught between popular culture, and on the other side, it's caught on exponential technology. And exponential technology and popular culture is a simultaneous loop. Okay, because the power of popular culture has really been a product of exponential
our
technology.
access that it truly is now. I think that I saw some interview with Michael Ovitz, the guy from Disney. Yeah. And it was really interesting contrasting, 20 years ago, 20 years ago and beyond, going backwards, he was really one of the most powerful people ever in shaping what we actually saw as a society, right? Because he controlled the outlets in terms of the Disney movies and the NBC or whatever, is it ABC or NBC that Disney owns? And so you look at all of that stuff, every popular show that got on television, every newscasts, all of that stuff. He was really shaping that, and it was a much more rigid sort of very few outlets to or beacons that we had to actually get access to things. And you think about why all these powerful people wanted to have own media, right? Own a newspaper and own television stations and stuff, because they were the beacon to the world kind of thing, right? To what's going on in your world locally. Then now with the internet, this is where truly popular culture is really reflective of what is popular culture, because it's become more of a meritocracy in a way, right? Where everything that is truly popular rises to the top.
Yeah.
Without any kind of, blocks or any gatekeepers to get there. And now it's come around. It's almost like you said, it's where that puts politics kind of secondary to popular culture and stuff. Because
and I think part of the reason why, going back to the Trump thing, Trump was deeply involved with popular culture, first of all, because he ran casinos, and casinos really have to have their ear to the ground about what the people who come in and play the slot machines and everything want from and the shows and and everything like that. And the other thing is he had one of the most successful reality TV programs, in history, 15 years, and he was, right at the top. So I think that he's got a tremendous ear for what's happening in popular culture and the other thing he had wrestling. He owned the wrestling for a while. The wrestling thing, and I mean wrestling, is one of the most enjoyable phony fake activities on the planet.
Yes,
but he understood that it wasn't about sport; it was about entertainment.
Yes, exactly.
And what he's done is that he's taken his side of the. It's like you go up against someone else. The Democrats have to sort this out over the next 2 years. Who are we going to put up against him, who has an ability to make himself look really entertaining and make you look boring for roughly 18 months coming up to an election?
Yes.
And he isn't going to destroy you in political debate. He's just going to make you look utterly boring by comparison.
Low energy, right?
Low energy,
yeah. Oh, so well done, right? It's so dismissive in a way, right?
And that's an understanding of popular culture. Popular culture is based on what's entertaining. It's not based on whether it's philosophically logical or rational. It's based on whether it's actually entertaining. And and people say, "Well, what a terrible world that is." And I said, "Is there some other world somewhere else?"
Well, there may be. We don't know. That's right.
Yeah. Mars. I heard the first wind. Did you hear the sounds of the wind from Mars?
No, I did not.
NASA landed.
I saw the news of the wind, but I have not actually heard the wind.
NASA just landed. And they have about 30 seconds. You can listen to it and listen to the wind, and I mean, it's wind and
Does it
everything
sound
else, but
like
it's got
our
a
wind?
significant. But we've never heard a sound from outer space.
Right.
This is the first time we've actually heard a sound from outer space. And it was kind of neat,
Wow.
And
Amazing.
What a crooked path we walked today.
We really did. I'm just looking at the clock here and realizing, yes, that we have walked a very circuitous journey today, but delightful in its surprises.
Yeah. And so, summing up the year, I mean, we're coming up. I mean, we'll have a couple more. We'll have at least one next week.
Yes.
Next Sunday. But I'm just wondering if you had to go January to December on three things that just period, you've really taken a jump in terms of improvement and more room for yourself. What would you say they are?
Well, certainly this idea of having my 1,000 Hoot Up hours as investable hours, and I'll tell you next time what I've been doing, how I'm allocating those, and it's just such this whole idea of really thinking about it like that, because I didn't understand something quite like I just have gotten it in the last few months since we've been having this conversation, that what that actually means, and to allow myself to be a catalyst. I really think like when I look back at the things that have been the biggest impacts that I've been able to have been through even bigger, more than the impact that I've been able to have individually, have been impacts that I've had in collaboration with other people. And that often, when my contribution in a lot of ways is, it on the surface seems simple, but because it's such a contextual bedrock to something, that that everything else that comes from that then is a multiplier. And I'm really like learning more and more about myself and embracing that. And so that's still a process that even for the last, I've kind of this last couple of months of the year, I've really taken some time, and I'm in the middle of that process right now, to really evaluate a lot of these things on my life here, and see where I'm going to point that, and embrace it, and give myself the freedom of not having to feel like I need to scale something, internally or on my own or something like that. But I can have a bigger impact on in collaboration. And so really looking at what that actually means, and how to find those opportunities. Yeah.
I think you covered three things in one statement. So that was good. Yeah. Well, mine is definitely the impact of the phrase that you came on a podcast once and said, I've discovered that that all the cause of my procrastination is where I try to do a how that some other who should actually be doing.
Right.
And that created the who, not how. And we sent you the new books. Did you enjoy them?
I love it. Yes. That's so great. It's so great.
And it's just utterly transformed our program. It's transforming our organization. And, and it's allowed us to go back and completely recontextualize every other, concept and tool we have in the program. So it's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the start of the Game Changer program has been huge. And I've said this in a number of situations. The learning curve that I feel I'm on since the Game Changer started
me too.
is the fastest that I can remember since I learned how to read when I was 6 years old. And my mother told me that school wasn't important, but reading really was. That because if you could read, you could go anywhere you wanted with your brain.
Yes.
And what this is reading 2.0 for me, a game changer, because I'm watching. I'm now able to profit by where other people's brains are going.
Yes.
In terms of the collaborative projects and enterprises that they're creating. So
yes.
I feel enormously stretched just by being in the workshop and listening to all the different ways that people are collaborating.
Yes. And that's, I mean, you're right. The synergy in the group. And I think everybody's having that same realization. Nick and I were talking that, even in conversations with other game outside of the workshops that we're having, this idea of who, not how, has been really embraced by everybody in terms of that's the way we're thinking now, is that we need a who for that. We need who's. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So good. I'm so excited. That's an example of a contextual, construct that has great things, much like, this before, during, and after that I've based all of my stuff on, of those the units.
Yeah.
So good. I can't wait to see how it all takes off.
That was a terrific use of 6 Jacksons.
Thank you. That's perfect. I love it. It really was.
It's funny, but some of the best Jacksons I ever spend are with Dean Jackson.
That's so great. I love it. So funny. Well, you have a great week, and I will.
Okay. We'll
I'll
talk next
talk
week.
to you. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Okay, bye.